Alright, so I'm gonna tell y'all about the shit I had to go through Monday night and then tonight. Because, okay, so this woman comes in, it's like, we close at 8. It's like 7 o'clock. We have, on Tuesday morning, the next day, we have an inspection first thing. So guy comes in, you know, looks at how the animals are, looks at how the store is, and he, you know, gives us a grade, all that. And because I'm in charge of aquatics, I have spent the last 2 shifts just on that section. Like, fucking scrubbing down shelves. I had to replace shelves that were all rusted out, doing labels. By the end of that night, all I had left to do was water changes in all the betas, and then go through all of the fish tanks and pull out all of the deads for that day, because I had not had a chance to do that yet that day. And so I start the betas, and unbeknownst to me as I'm doing this, our dog trainer, who is having a class at the moment, every other minute this woman comes up to our dog trainer and she's like, hey, can you get me some fish? And she's like, I'm sorry, I can't do fish. I'm just the dog trainer and I'm in the middle of the class. There should be somebody in aquatics who can help you though. I think he's still back there. And she'd be like, oh, okay. And then she'd walk away and she'll go stand in an aisle for a couple minutes, and then she would come back and ask her the same fucking question. And this was apparently happening over and over and over again for like 15 minutes. To the point where she was telling me her clients, the customers she was working with, they would warn her every time they saw that woman walking over, because they knew that she was going to be bothering her. And so eventually I happened to walk past her while I'm going to go grab something, and I overhear this conversation. I'm like, yeah, I can help you in fish. And so this woman, she's like, okay, I want to get 3 goldfish. And I'm like, okay, what size tank do you have? And she looks at me and she says, well, he told me it was 20 gallons for every 1 goldfish. So I have a 60-gallon tank. No human being on earth talks like that. Nobody has to do math to figure out what kind of tank they have. So I already know she's lying. And I'm like, okay. Is there anything else in that tank right now? And she says, no, it's empty. And I'm like, is it running? Is it already, you know, filled and running? And she said, yeah. And I'm like, okay. At this point, I shouldn't give you the fish. I'm thinking to myself, I shouldn't give this woman the fish, but I'm gonna, because I can't really prove that she's lying to me without being an asshole. So I'm gonna give her the fish. And I go through and she's like, I want like 2 orange goldfish and 1 white goldfish. It takes me forever to fish them out of the fucking tank. And I give them to her, and I get them in a bag, and I write her up a slip, and I'm like, all right, have a good night. And she's like, okay, thanks, and walks away. 30 seconds later, she turns around and she comes back, and she's like, hey, if I have to put these guys in a 10-gallon tank while I'm setting up the 60-gallon, that should be okay, right? Now keep in mind, these are comet goldfish. For those of you who are not aquatically inclined, comet goldfish are pretty much the exact same thing as koi fish. They can get to be over a foot. They live for 15 to 20 years. They are poop machines. You cannot... Honestly, a 60-gallon is really small for 3 comet goldfish. Fancies, maybe, but comets, abso-fucking-lutely not. They're basically carp. They're literally just orange carp. Like, there's been no selective breeding whatsoever to make them smaller. And so I tell her, you really shouldn't. And I'm like, I thought you said, you know, the 60 was already set up. She's like, yeah, I just need to clean it. And I'm like, I guess since these are really small right now, if you wanted to put them in the 10 overnight, I guess you could, but I really wouldn't recommend keeping them in there longer than 24 hours. She's like, wow, really? That's such a short amount of time. And I'm like, yeah. And I had to explain to her probably 5 times over the concept of stunting a fish's growth and how that can have health effects and how it's going to limit the fish's lifespan, da-da-da-da-da. And then finally she's like, okay, well, I have a 20-gallon tank at home also that's already set up and running. Can't I put the fish in that? And I'm like, at this point, it's like 7:45. I still have literally the entire store stock of beta fish needs a full water change, and I still have to check the deads and everything. And I'm supposed to be out at 8. I only worked a 5-hour shift, so I didn't get a break or anything. I was offered a break to stay later, but I was like, nah, I think I can get everything done by 8. I'm gonna skip a break, I'm just gonna go, and then I'm gonna leave at 8. And that didn't fucking work out for me. So if I'm just like You know what, yeah, you can keep them in a 20-gallon short term, but I mean short term. Like, I would have them in there for as short as possible. And I told her, like, again, I really recommend, if the 60 isn't ready, wait. Make sure the 60 is 100% ready, and then come back and get the fish. There's not gonna be a run on 30-cent feeder goldfish. We will still have them, and I promise some of them will be orange. But, you know, she wasn't taking no for an answer, and I had technically already given her the fish. Can I go here? I can go here. I'm gonna get into a fucking car accident while I'm doing this. I'm not even done talking about Monday, and then there's all of tonight. So I'm like, yeah, whatever. And she's like, oh, okay, thanks. And then she walks away. And then a couple minutes later, she comes back. She's like, hey, can you help me get this 20-gallon tank kit off the shelf? And I'm like, off the shelf? And she's like, oh, it's a gift for my neighbor. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, it's over here. And at this point, I want her to fuck off and leave me alone. So I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll humor her, whatever. It really doesn't fucking matter. Like, I love fish, I love animals. I am technically in training to be the aquatics manager, so I shouldn't be, but I'm not gonna die on the hill for 3 30-cent goldfish. Especially when they're already feeders and they're probably already going to die because they don't do, they don't do health checks on feeders before they send them to us anyway. So they usually all die within the first week. And so I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll give her the fucking fish. I'll give her the tank, whatever. And so we get to the shelf where all the tanks are. And the one 20-gallon kit that we have is behind a fully loaded pallet from last week's truck. Now, the pallets that we get in are these, you know, these big wooden pallets. And they're stacked almost up to the ceiling with cardboard boxes full of merchandise that wrapped around in plastic wrap. So the only way to move those is to break them down, you know, cut open that plastic wrap and take off each individual box, open them up, put all the stock where it belongs. And that's not fucking happening at 7:45 on a Monday night. And so I tell her I can't get to it there, I'm sorry. And she's like, well, can't you like reach around and try to like pull it through? And I'm like, I can try. And there was an empty wooden pallet next to it. So I go and I put my foot on it to balance myself while I lean over. My foot fucking falls right through the slat. I nearly break my fucking ankle. I'm like shouting, I'm like, Jesus Christ. And she's like, oh no, be careful. Like, exactly like that. Like, no concern whatsoever. I'm genuinely, I was limping all day yesterday. I'm genuinely surprised that I woke up today and I was fine. I really thought I actually hurt myself. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm done. And I tell her, let me go grab some help. And so I run up front and I'm like, my mindset is I just got to get my manager. I got to get my manager and she'll tell her to fuck off. And then we can be good. And I'll have to stay a little bit late, but I'll cut my losses. And so, fuck, I'm already almost home. And so I go up front and I get to the register and I realize the register is slammed. So that night it was me, my manager, the dog trainer, and my coworker who was the cashier. And so my manager and my coworker were on the registers, both working their asses off. We had a line all the way practically to the back of the store. We were slammed. Again, this is like 10 minutes before close. Nobody's locked the doors yet, so people are still coming in and like taking their sweet ass time wandering around. The clients that our dog trainer was working with are in line, and their dog had a marking problem, so he's pissing on every single end cap all the way up and down the aisles. It's a nightmare. And I finally managed to get a word in, and I'm like, hey, Rachel. And I say to my manager, hey, Rachel, can you help me out with this woman in fish? She's insane. And she's like, we're a little busy. And I'm like, I can take the register. I just need you to tell her no, because she's not listening to me. And she goes back there. By the time Rachel gets back there, this woman has somehow already managed to get the tank off of the shelf. And she is walking up with it like in a 20, it's a 20 high, it's not a 20 long, but it's still a big bulky tank. And she was a small woman. And she had the fish bag with the goldfish like balanced, really precarious. I'm gesturing with my hands, even though my car light isn't on. She had it like balanced on top and was like carrying it with the fish like wiggling around. So we finally get her in line. And I'm turning this off. I don't like looking at my face. We finally get her in line. By some miracle, she ends up at my register while I'm checking people out, and she gets to the front and she tells me, hey, I need to exchange something that my neighbor bought. He's waiting in the car, let me go grab it. And before I can say anything, she runs out. And of course, nobody's locked the doors yet, even though it's like 10 minutes past close, and she's gone. And I'm like, thinking to myself, maybe I should lock the door behind her and maybe she'll just give up. But I didn't do that because I'm not an asshole. And she comes in with an unopened, unused 10-gallon tank kit. The very same tank kit that she told me she already had up and running and ready for fish. So I already know she's a fucking liar, but that's like, that's a new fucking low. I have not seen that happen yet. And so she returns the tank, she buys the other tank, and then she's like, oh, I was talking to the people at the other store. It was like it was on the other end of the fucking state. It was some other fucking store. The store that I bought the 10-gallon at, and they told me you could honor the 20% off coupon that I used on my transaction there. You could honor it on this transaction. And I said, no, that's not how it fucking works. And I'm like, I'm sorry, ma'am, but if a coupon's already been used, we can't use it again unless you have another copy of that coupon, or like if you have anything to show me that I can scan. But I can't manually put in a transaction discount coupon. Like, I can't give you 20% off the whole transaction. That's not even a coupon that exists. We have 20% off an individual item, or like a certain dollar amount off if you spend a certain dollar amount. We do not have a flat rate 20% off your purchase. That's a lie. We have that for our online orders. I have food. I should probably finish this story and go inside. We have that for our online orders. We don't have it in the store. And we go back and forth about this for like 15 minutes. And eventually she's like, can you just get your manager? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I'll go get Rachel. I'm sure she'd love to talk to you. And so I go get her. And she comes out. And this woman says the exact same thing. And Rachel's like, no, I can't do that for you. And then they go back and forth for like 15 minutes. And I'm kind of just like, I'm stuck in the middle. And it's like when you're like, your parents are fighting in the two front seats of the car and you're in the back and you're like 2 years old and you're like, what the fuck's going on? Are we still going to McDonald's? Like, it was really fucking awkward because I was standing there at the register computer while Rachel's on one side and the customer's on the other side, and they're both going back and forth. This is like a clash of the Karens. Like, it was just white suburban mom on white suburban mom violence, and it was a mess. And finally, because it's half an hour past close and this woman is still in the fucking store, Rachel gives in and she's like, oh, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 10%, but that's it. We can't do this again. This is not something we do. The woman's like, oh, okay, thank you so much. Like, shut the fuck up. And then she gets her stuff and she's like, oh my god, what was your name? Thank you so much for your help. Thanks, bye. And then I shut the fucking door behind her and I'm like, holy fucking shit. So I have to stay, that night, I had to stay 2 hours. I had to stay till like 10 to do water changes and get the fish section ready to go because we had that inspection the next morning. Thank God we got like a 99 on that inspection. We did really fucking well. And I hope to God we did after all the fucking work we put in. But my food's gonna get cold and I haven't eaten all day. So I'm gonna finish this story inside. But that was Monday. That was my Monday adventure. It was a fucking nightmare.